Why do you think what do you think women mean when they say they don't want to have to settle? What does that mean to men when you guys hear black women especially say that?
When they have to settle. I think we all do that laugh that I just did. We all are like, are you serious? Because at the end of the day, we're all settling. If you're with somebody, I think we need to replace the word from settling to that's your person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because we are who we attract
Mm.
in our lives. And I can even say that too. When I was out running the streets and being out in the clubs all the time and things of that nature, I attracted a certain type of woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now I like homebodies. you know, I like a woman who can stay home. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want her to have a social life, of course, but I don't want, men as they mature, they don't want their woman out in the streets. They
Mm-mm.
want somebody at home. And
Facts.
so, you got to be very careful with that, because oftentimes if women are out in the streets, you best believe that man is probably out in the streets as well.
Mm.
So, settling for, when we hear that, it's a slap in the face. It's something that we are like, well, what are we doing here? So what does that mean for us? And then I would think about it from the logical standpoint. If you're settling, what does that mean I'm getting? Because if we're
Well,
reflect, if you're settling for me, and we are in itself a reflection of who we are, that
come on,
means that
Corey.
who you are.
What- There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So you got to think
There it
about it
is.
differently. And a lot of times it's hard to put that mirror up. And we've all had to, at some point, put the mirror up. It just depends on what do you plan on doing when you see what's really in it.
That's so deep. That is so deep. I wish I could record. Well, this is recorded. I want
Yeah.
to hit play. Every time I hear a woman say that, I want to hit
Yeah.
the play button
Yeah.
on this
Yeah.
YouTube video right
Mhm.
here. Like, listen to what Corey has to say about this. Because it's so true. And that's like one of the biggest things. In fact, one of my most popular YouTube videos, if you go and look at a lot of the comments from the women,
Right.
so are you saying I need to settle? Why you keep
Mhm.
talking about me? And I'm like, that's not what I'm
Because
saying.
if men came and went around just saying, "Oh, I settled for her." I literally had a friend of mine, a coworker, about 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, and he said to me, "My wife is a good person. She may not be the best looking thing in the world, but he could have easily said, but she's a good mom and she's a good wife, and
Hmm.
so I think I lucked out." That's what he said. And this is a decent looking brother. He played football at HBCU, and he said that. And if you twist it and you put in the word settle, a lot of women will be very, very offended. And so I
Very.
think a lot of times when people say settle, it's not really that's what they're saying, but it's also the words that they're using to describe what they are reflecting.
Mm. And it all exactly, and it also captures this reality that nobody gets 100% of what they want. That is not
Mhm.
realistic. There's not one
Absolutely
person,
not.
not even Michelle Obama, who we
No.
love and respect so much, and we worship the ground she walks on. Guess what? She said in her own words she was miserable for 10 years. So
Yeah.
she didn't even get 100% of what she
Mhm.
wanted. So it's
But
just
we,
not.
but I think that the struggle with that is over the last 10 years, women have heard you can
Mhm.
have it all. And
The lie.
because you hear that, then you're being lied to, right? Then now that's why they feel like they're settling. And if
Yeah.
you really are paying attention to the media and you really don't understand your history and where we come from, our,
Mhm.
our fathers and grandfathers didn't have no whole bunch of money.
No.
And you're not going to answer, you probably don't won't ask me this question, but your mom probably settled in your eyes. Your grandfather probably settled in your eyes. But the
Mhm.
thing about it is, I always will say, those are the women that are first to say, "Oh, my grandparents were married for 50 years. My mother and father were married for 30 years." And they wear it like it's a badge of
That's
honor to
honor.
tell the other person as if that's you.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
oftentimes it's not. And
Yeah.
so if that's settling, I want to settle too.
Settling is he doesn't make six
Right.
figures. He's under 6 feet. He doesn't
Right.
have a six pack. He took me to the Cheesecake Factory.
Hmm.
I mean, these are all definitions of settling. And it's
Right.
like all of those things are actually most women who get married are probably getting married to men who are not, that's a fact, because there are not
Hmm.
a lot of tall men.
Right.
That's just,
Hmm.
statistically speaking. Most men don't have six packs, especially in their 40s. I'm sorry.
Right.
That's rare. So yeah, it's just it's really, and then these are the same women who complain and cry about
Hmm.
being single, but yet don't want to settle. It's
Hmm.
interesting.
And I will say this too, and I've heard this from other men. A lot of women wouldn't even want to date themselves. If you really look at it
Hmm,
and how they treat the man and how they're moving, you
you
wouldn't even
got
want to
that
date
right.
yourself. So I
You
think
got that
that's
right.
something too that you have to really like look at.
That Corey, you are you need to be a preacher. Like
Uh-oh.
for real. I don't know if you ever thought about it, but you need to be.
No, no. I'm gonna get all these negative comments, but I'm here for it. So you can ask what you want to ask.
I have one more. I think
Mhm.
this might. I know we are being mindful of the time. I have
Yeah.
another one. Now, this might be my most controversial one.
Okay.
Is about age,
Mm.
because I know that that's a big thing, and especially as
Ah,
women in our 40s,
yeah.
we're getting a little sensitive because
Yeah.
we're looking at the girls in the 20s, and we're like,
Hmm.
hold on now, and then we're competing and going and getting our surgery and whatever we're doing
Right.
to try to compete. But that
Hmm.
is a big thing now. Is I've had several videos about Vivica Fox. A
Hmm.
lot of
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
commentary goes into her being
Hmm.
older
Yeah.
and expecting to get a man like 50 Cent.
Right.
So my question is, what do men, black men
Yeah.
around your age,
Hmm.
when you're mid
Mid
40s,
40. Uh-huh.
what are their thoughts on women in our age? Like who do they typically date, and who also do they find typically attractive, and who do they want to marry? Three different categories. Who do they find attractive? Who do they want to marry? And who do they date?
So I would say, and I mentioned this to you because I grew up around a lot of older people. I was super mature for my age as a young man in my early 20s, and I always dated older. I thought it was very fascinating, but like I said before, I was a bit more ready to be married, and I knew that. So I knew that I wasn't ready to be married, but I knew I had time too. And so I didn't really understand too much about the biological clock until I got to be about 34, 35. And so when
Mhm.
I understood what that looked like and understood a little bit more, I think biologically and then historically, like this is the first time in mankind we're looking at things in this type of space.
Yeah.
Men have always historically dated younger,
Mm.
always. My
Interesting.
brother dated, his first wife. I think when you're coming out of college or you're coming out of high school and you're dating, dating people around the same age. But once you start maturing and understand who you are and, reflecting on certain things, and then you get past 35 into in your middle age, you start looking at like a lot of the women that you're seeing in your relationships with, or you might be your peers, you
Yeah.
might their expectations are higher. And so what I was taught um, when I was younger, if a woman isn't really where she needs to be, or even sounding like she needs to be where she wants to be by 37, 36, you should run. And that
Okay.
was years ago. And so
Mhm.
now, I know you talked about your story, but you caught yours on when you needed to catch them.
I was
And
right there.
so, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm not saying that doesn't happen either. But I'm talking
Mhm.
about like, a lot of my friends they date younger, and so the ones that and a lot of women that I've come in contact with, they don't want to date guys who are 6 years, 10 years their senior for whatever reason. The main reason is guys in their 50s aren't, moving around and doing things like guys in their 30s or in their early 40s, and that very well may be true, but at the same time, like we can't fight what nature and what the men that I've talked to they go down to. Both of my brothers have dated women and married them 10 and 12 years below, because for one, the women got on their page, and I hate to say that out loud, but I want to say it because you asked me. They got on their page. They really wanted to be with them. They seemed like they were more. They still had submissiveness in their minds,
Mhm.
and that wasn't a bad word.
It's
And
not.
they really wanted to be married, and I say they
Yeah.
really wanted to be married. And so that meant that they were able to be submissive and not look at the guy as, and looked at kind of to what we talked about. They did the opposite of the sick, and these guys aren't 6 feet and six packs. These guys are good guys. These are men who have a faith base, who understand family, who looks at family first
Mm,
and puts their family, but even before themselves. And so
wow.
I admire them for that. So the guys I try to hang around are all like that. Even the ones that aren't married, that we talk about it all the time. They want to have someone who is not going to be combative, who's going to get on their page. And when I say on their page, doesn't mean, I think that rubs women the wrong way sometimes, because they're hearing it as a negative, like, what about my page? But it needs to coincide with what your beliefs are. So
Sure.
what those beliefs are for that man. And I say a man's page because like we talked about, a man's going to have to die for his family. So why wouldn't that be on his page?
Yeah.
Because he needs to lead the family. That doesn't mean that if you are an accountant, you may do the books for the family.
Absolutely.
You're in this together, but at the
Mhm.
same time, there is something about, you coming home, even when we were kids and looking at the Cosby Show or those old shows. It was something about daddy coming home and having a say. Even
Mhm.
with my nephews, my nephew, I remember when he was 5, he's 15 now. I remember it was something about um daddy would come home, his tone, and he would straighten up just like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
there is something to say about us both being here and what we can bring to the table. And
I
I'll
agree.
say this, I don't believe that women are, we're equal in that space either.
Mm,
But I do feel, and I think a lot of women shut down when I say that, but I don't believe that
mhm.
that doesn't mean you don't have value. I
Correct.
think women have a strong value in relationships, but you have a different value. And the
I
reason why
agree.
I say equal is because, again, a man is losing his life for his family. That
Indeed.
should weigh a lot. And I think once women understand that piece, that
Mhm.
he would, and
Mhm.
they don't take it for granted, that's when a relationship flourishes. Because
Oh,
then like why you're here. You're here to nourish him, to make sure he's okay. You bring the peace to the family, and you also create that space for when he is mad, to how to calm him down. Because it might be 5 people around, but when he hears your voice, he's
mhm.
gonna calm down.
And
So that
how
takes
about
time. Mhm.
that is you are preaching. And also, if a woman wants to be married, wants to be a
Mhm.
wife, how about normalizing liking to be on his page?
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
nothing
yeah.
wrong with
Mm-mm.
like I feel like I want to be on that page. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah,
Because clearly as a single mom for like 10
yeah.
years
You're doing it by yourself.
my page wasn't working.
Yeah,
My
yeah, yeah,
page
yeah.
was difficult, it was
Mhm,
hard,
mhm,
it was struggle, and I like being on this page. And so I think that's
mhm,
another thing, like you said, women get triggered, but it's like, well, listen to what you're saying. Like you're actually not saying anything bad.
mhm,
If you want to be married, you should appreciate this
mhm.
man having a plan, and
Yes,
yes, that is
yes.
going to require some
And I
work.
think what they're missing. You can't be with the guy who doesn't have the plan.
Yes.
And they get with guys who don't have the plans. And so when they're hearing us say this, it sounds like a negative. No,
Ah,
you have to be on a man's page who
that's
has a
deep.
plan,
I never thought about it
who
like
is going somewhere. So because he's going somewhere, and you want to be on that train to whatever journey that you all have. But if he's just at the station, he's not moving, of course. But a lot of times, a lot of those guys that they're superficially being with, they don't have that plan that they can see, and they're not moving in that space. And
that.
oftentimes I hear that all the times, because I'll probe and ask those questions, and oftentimes they're not really saying it. And guys know it, right? Some guys are really just playing the field and just saying stuff to say it. But what
Yeah.
does their life look like? Are they telling you where they were and where they're going and how
Mm.
they're going to do it? And do they have the proof in what they're doing? I will always say, and I'll leave with this one, if that was the last question. Even in dating, right? I think when if I had a daughter, and this guy was saying all these sweet nothings and things of that nature, if he can't even plan the date, going off to what
Mm.
you said about your friends, if they can't plan a date, it doesn't have to be extravagant, but does he provide a space for me to feel comfortable and for us to
Yeah.
have a conversation and get
Yeah.
to know each other and then progress?
Mhm.
Because that's
Mhm.
building trust. That's
Yeah.
building a plan, because even with the dating itself, that's a plan. And I think over
Yeah,
time, when we see that you have a plan and you can rest in your, y'all say, your femininity all the time,
it's
then
true.
you like, hey, why, what I need to be going back and forth with you about? What, I'm here at 5 o'clock at, yeah, or what you need me to wear, what you need
Mhm.
me to bring, you
Yes.
know. And if I was a woman, shit, I want this, I would want the same thing, you know. Damn, what we
Okay.
doing, you know? And I think men
Tell me where to
have
be
that.
and what time. I'm good.
There you
I'm
go.
there.
There you go. And I think
Yeah.
men have that same thing. So I think that same equivalent was when, our grandparents would cook Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, and we go and we downstairs in watching football or whatever the case may be, and
Mhm.
that's that same place. Because what would
Mhm.
they tell you? Get out my kitchen. And what would
Yes.
you say? All right, so it's kind of that, a guy would be able to accept that. He doesn't get frustrated about it. He doesn't get upset about it. He says, I know
Mhm.
my place. All right, cool.
Sure.
I'm out of here. But I think it's just the wording that a lot of people are just super sensitive these days. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we can't do that, but hopefully we can bring it back.
Wow. I'm learning so much, but I love what you said. This is gonna definitely be a big takeaway for me as
Mhm.
I continue to do what I do on YouTube, and then the
Yeah,
backlash that I get sometimes from women,
yeah.
which is what you said. If a woman has never experienced a man with a plan,
Mhm.
and she's hearing me say, talk about submit or whatever it is, that's going to be triggering, because it's like, well, you don't even know what it's like to have a guy like that.
Right,
So then
right. And
obviously, why
unfortunately, a
would
lot of guys aren't like that either. A lot of guys weren't taught that. They
you?
just kind of go with the flow. And I push back on those guys too. Like,
Mhm.
how would you expect, going back if you had a daughter, you would want that as well for your daughter.
Of
And so
course.
I know something we were taught in our community where we stop that. And a lot of us didn't have those father figures around to kind of teach us that. And that's unfortunate as well. So I would never, if I had a daughter, tell her to follow somebody or have somebody. I don't even do that. My own career is follow
Mhm.
somebody. I might allow them to manage me, but I don't
Sure.
follow anybody that doesn't have a plan and they themselves aren't moving in that plan. So
Yes. I have one last
sure, go ahead.
question, if I can,
Yeah.
and then I know we have to wrap it up. Now, I'm saying this is the last. This is
Okay.
the most controversial question,
Okay.
Corey.
All
You
right.
ready
All
for
right.
this?
Yeah.
Just to make it real spicy over here. Have you dated non-black women,
Mhm.
and what would be, in your opinion, the difference between dating black women
Mhm.
versus non-black women?
I would say both of them have a certain level of loyalty. So I'll
Mm,
start off with a positive thing, but I
okay.
would say from off the off from the beginning, it's just you feel like a king off rip.
For real.
And yeah, like I, I've
Look, I'm
I've
like, this
dated
is
I've
juicy.
dated
Tell me
I've
more.
dated I've dated every type of race, and so
Okay.
I've experienced that, and you feel different. I'm not saying I haven't had experiences with black women like that, but for the most part, other cultures, they seem like they're really in tune to listening to you. They really, that appreciation thing. They're like, and it's the smallest things. Oh, I know you. I know you were working all day, but I just dropped by and want bring you lunch. What? And this might be in a dating phase. Whereas I've heard some women in dating, like, oh, black women, and I think it's because of you know bad choices. I think my biggest thing is even what Kevin Samuels say all the time is women are bad at choosing the
Yeah.
right man. And you always want the bad guy and things of that nature, but you have
Yeah.
to grow into that next guy, your
Mm,
husband. And so
mhm,
because they have that and they're so used to that, they don't know how to pick the other guy. And so I think
mhm.
those women that I can think of, they would do it off rip. And the black women who failed to do it maybe at the first couple of times, but I think when they matured and they kind of got to the place that you're speaking of, they may have started doing it, but it may have been on later on. Whereas
Mhm.
I feel like the other women would do it, maybe a little bit earlier because they didn't have the trauma and the things that a
Yeah.
lot of our sisters deal with. And it's
Yeah.
because of our community, we can blame it on that. But at the same time, we can't. We got to grow up and say we have to own it. And because we're not owning it, it's going to fester until we become 40s, 50s, and 60s, unfortunately. So I think off rip, like the first couple of times and you feel like, wow, you call me, it's no games. It's like, oh yeah, you take your time, da 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 da. Or um it's a level of like maturity. But I think that goes back to the question you asked me earlier about those communities. We used to be like that,
Yeah.
because when we had our own before integration, you weren't able to get with anybody unless that was so and so and so and so's people, and
Yeah.
your last name meant something. So when you went over to so and so's house, you also had to meet so and so's father. So you weren't coming over there acting any kind of way, especially if you wanted to talk to her. So we come from that, but we're losing a lot of that because society, and we're not holding each other accountable, and it has to be the accountability, because you and I have talked about this the other day. I can remember hearing from my grandmother and great grandmother about the fact that you couldn't walk down the street unless somebody you know told you to, if you did something wrong at school or did something outside of your community, people were telling you, because you were so
Absolutely.
and so's people.
Holding you accountable.
Your last name meant something in the community. So
Mhm.
I don't know how we even get that back, but I do believe that is one of the biggest things, and unfortunately, we've seen that a lot, and hopefully we can get back to that, and we can, our women really understand that it's not personal. We want you to get to that place, and and it strikes me sometimes, especially with our sisters who are very religious, who
Mm. Mhm.
you're supposed to go into spaces where you are um, have faith, because
Mm.
if we know that who's really in charge here, there's nothing that will happen to us. So I think that's the hardest part too.
Mhm.
So you have to have faith,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
to go in those spaces, and and still take some precautions when you're
Sure.
dating, but at the same time, you gotta follow your gut, and have faith, and understand like what, and be healed first. And I think that faith
Yes.
works on the back end.
Mm.
I'm not saying, I know that sounds crazy. It's still in you, but it
Mhm.
works in the back end if something was to happen, because you
Yes,
know who's with you at all times. So
indeed.
mhm.
And just to connect those to the what I asked you before,
Yeah.
why do you think statistically then, if what you're saying,
Hmm, hmm.
is true, which I believe you because I've
Right,
heard it before
right,
from
right,
black
right.
men, if that is true, statistically, why do black men marry black women more? It's more likely that they're going to marry black women. Why is that?
Because we want legacy. We
Mm,
want legacy, and we want to see that kid that we were. We see a lot of our sons and daughters within ourselves, and a
mm,
lot of times, well, I know men get married because they want to throw that football with their son.
yeah.
I was being real with you. I mean, that's what they say. Everybody want every man. I know men that would try. They'll have 8 girls to try to get a boy.
Trying it for that boy. Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why, and we really do want to just be with black women, but it's just
Mm,
hard to for whatever reason. We're having a tough time to connect these days, and I
mm,
wish we would all put our walls down and try to connect, but we have to choose for the right reasons, not for those
mm.
reasons that we were saying are superficial. But if we choose the way that you describe, how and even in our conversation we had in the last podcast, then I think a lot of women will be where you are right now,
Mm.
because we've seen them. Like, we
Yeah,
grew up seeing these people like this, but for some reason we strayed away from that. And
we did.
even for myself, like I had women when I was younger that I could have got married to, but I wasn't right. I wasn't
Sure.
ready, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And because I can recognize that, and I can say it, and without any like, not feeling any type of way about it, but own it. I think that's what everybody has to do, and I don't see women
Yeah.
saying that when I have conversation with them in my past. It's hard for them to say, "Well, I wasn't this person that you're meeting right now. I've done a lot of work on myself." And
Sure.
it's usually the other person,
Mm.
but we are
Wow.
all a reflection of the person that we're with, or we
Mm.
around at that moment in life. So,
You are so right. We can end it on that note. That was the real statement. When you say that,
yeah,
it resonates so much because all the complaining that I
Yeah.
did for all those years,
Hmm.
I have to remember that I was actually looking at a mirror.
Absolutely.
That man was a mirror to
Absolutely.
me. So
Yeah.
whatever I was complaining about, I need to take responsibility over the fact that it
Hmm.
was probably something I was also struggling with.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I'm
And
saying?
it's hard to admit that, and that's okay.
Very. It
Mhm.
is. It's hard to look at, but it's this was we got to do this again. I
Yeah.
actually learned
Yeah.
so much. I feel like I just took a class.
Yeah. That's what people say sometimes when I'm talking, but who knows? But
And you're such a
sometimes you
natural
get
at it
people.
too. Yeah, you're so good at it. So this was great.
Well, let's continue to do this and let's try to help our people grow. Come, get back to get that old thing back, like that we
Yeah.
remember, and
And Corey,
we'll try this again. Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but how do people get into if they want life
Yes.
coaching? How do
Yes.
they get in touch?
Yes. So my show is the Brother to Brother show, but you can find me on Tomorrow's Men, at Tomorrow's Men on IG and on Facebook, and I have a website called Tomorrow's Men. So if you want to book something, have consultations on there, feel free to go on, and we can have those conversations, and we can bring each other back to that old thing, like I said before. So.
And are you primarily on YouTube or Instagram?
So I'm kind of going in between right now, primarily Instagram, but I have a lot of videos up, and I have a lot of I put all my podcasts on my Tomorrow's Men YouTube channel. So check that out,
Okay.
and you tell me in comment and tell me what you think.
For all my subscribers in my community, please go and subscribe to Corey. What you just heard here, if you want to get that times 1,000, go to his YouTube channel, go to his Instagram. I'm 100%. I know we follow each other on Instagram, but I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to Corey on YouTube. And if I'm not, I'm about to do it right now. But he is amazing. His advice is amazing, his perspective. And I want everybody to support Corey Morris. Did I
Yep.
say that right?
Yeah.
Corey Morris.
Yeah.
See, I got your first and last name right. Your government name.
But my YouTube, I always call myself K Mo
Oh,
to kind of go
sorry.
on brother to brother on my shows. So yeah, but it's
So
all
I'm
good. We'll
sorry.
get
So
it.
they're
We'll
not going
get
to
to
look
all
for
that
Corey
later.
Morris. They're going to look for
K Mo, but no, they're gonna look for me on Tomorrow's Men on all platforms, and it's Tomorrow's Men, and I have a story on there about my mother, and this is actually an organization that she started when I was a child, and I just piggybacked and took that name from her, and tried to incorporate that with the community, and we can continue that legacy.
I have to remember that everybody's not crazy enough to make their YouTube channel their government name like
Right.
me.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Corey. I appreciate that.
All right. Until next time, we'll see each other. Peace.
Yes, it was great.
All right.
Bye.